Si no quieres perderte nada, ya sabes, dale a la campana. Muy buenas, ¿cómo va la vida? ¿Te defiendes como gato panza arriba? Bienvenido a un nuevo vídeo en el que vamos a volver a entrevistar a Ed, a SapMagic, ya sabéis, el Rioter, pues que ha estado principalmente encargado de todo el tema de las nuevas ranked. Al igual que en la primera ocasión, pues muchas gracias a Ben por organizar toda la charla con Ed. En esta ocasión, muchas gracias al equipo de League of Legends España, del League Partner, muchas gracias a Kails por haber montado esta cosica para poder traeros más información y una charla más directa sobre esta vaina. Dicho esto, al final os hago un pequeño resumen y ahora vamos con la entrevista.
Pretty much all the team and my time has been spent on getting position ranks ready, getting split rewards ready. They just hit PBE last week, so yeah, we've been working really hard on those things, making sure that the system is ready to go for the start of the season. Yeah, that's kind of been the last couple months and probably the next couple months as well. I expect that things are definitely going to be in a bit of a state of flux for the first split. This is a new system, and there are many things about the system that we're really going to need to actually get player feedback on in order to make sure that they're really good. And I would imagine also that there will be an initial learning period for players. There's a lot of things that we're adding on top of the system that for someone who maybe hasn't been following along for the past, God, I don't know, 10 months or whatever, they may not be totally up to speed on everything that's changed, and I think there will be a period of discovery there. So that's what I'd expect. Yeah, I would say the name of Iron Tier. Initially, when we set out to name the tiers, we knew that we did want to make it a medal. And we knew we wanted it to be specifically below bronze because we didn't want to break up the progression of like bronze, silver, gold, the kind of Olympic medal progression, right? And so given that we wanted to keep those things, we're like, okay, well, we needed a medal tier for below bronze. And the thing that made sense and seemed like it would fit in League of Legends was copper, right? Because copper is part of bronze in terms of it being an alloy, and copper is also a pretty common metal, and we would have been able to probably differentiate it pretty well visually. It would have been kind of a reddish color. The problem is when we went to translate the name copper to other languages, there were a bunch of problems, right? In some languages it translated to something that was offensive. In some languages it translated to something that maybe sounded bad or not exciting or negative. And so at the end of the day, we were like, okay, well, I guess we have to change this. And the problem was we had actually recorded our dev diary on tiers and placements before all of this happened. So we had already chosen the name Copper. We had recorded it into all of our lines. We had to actually go back in the studio and like re-record voiceover that basically said that like where we just said like iron in place of copper. And so if you go back and watch that video, you can hear the parts where we kind of like redubbed it because the audio sounds slightly different. And so yeah, that was kind of a funny story. League of Legends universe, and to do that we wanted to take inspiration from different champions and different medals and different materials from the lore and things like that. And so when we did that, we were like, we want to loosely base each emblem off maybe champions from a certain faction. The hope is when you look at that emblem, if you think really long and hard about it, you're like, oh, that's Zon, right? But the hope is less that players will do that and more that they'll look at it and they'll go like, oh yeah, that looks kind of familiar, that looks like something I'd see in League of Legends. The basic answer, and I think this is actually kind of important because it underpins the entire system. You do have an MMR for each position you play, but we started at some point based on data that we can look at. People who play top lane, how much worse do they tend to be in these other positions kind of thing? We can use that as a starting point. But I think there's another important thing that's worth pointing out, because The example I hear a lot from people is, oh, I'm a diamond top laner. Isn't it silly that you would put me in a bronze game? And I'm like, yeah, that's really silly. We would never do that, right? And the way that we avoid doing that is if you have all of your MMRs, right? You have your 5 MMRs. You can imagine there's kind of like an invisible link between them. That link helps us during matchmaking. We can look at all of your other MMRs when we're matchmaking you if we don't have any games for that position. And because they're linked, we can also create our own rules in terms of matchmaking for how far we'll let you get. So like we can say, okay, well, if you're a platinum player and you can play in platinum games, the worst we'll ever match you is gold. Yeah, this idea of linking is actually what helps us avoid situations where a player gets into a massively higher ranked game on their main and then abuses all that knowledge from plat, diamond, etc. to stomp noobs down in like bronze or whatever. After all, I think the core of this is we want to make matchmaking better, and I think things like that would make it tremendously worse, so we want to avoid that. We don't have any plans to do that right now. I will say that we've talked about it a lot. We've done some preliminary research in certain regions of how that could work. We don't have any plans to do anything like that. Yeah, that's a good question. I think we've held off a little bit on figuring out season rewards because we want to see kind of how the season starts to unfold. We would almost certainly want to do something with season rewards that recognizes players for mastery across positions. I don't know if it would necessarily be all 5 gold or something like that, but it could be. And I think something that I'd be really open to hearing from your community and from any player really is things like what's a reasonable and fair sort of recognition for multi-position mastery. And I'll tell you why I asked that question, because one of the fears that I have, or one of the fears that we've had as a team about doing something like that is if let's just say for simplicity that we do a skin that you can only earn if you hit gold in all 5 positions. I think the worry would be players might feel like we were saying that they have to play all 5 positions, even the ones that they hate playing or the ones they're really not going to enjoy. So I think that's the kind of risk that we want to be careful of. Well, I think I'm fairly optimistic that if positional matchmaking and position ranks works well, that is, it makes games more fair. I think that in some ways will naturally help to curb some of the frustration and pain that people experience right now, both in Champion Select and in game. I basically think people are less toxic when they feel like they're in a fair game, playing something that they can competently play, and that they have a good chance at winning, right? And I think that's the goal of position ranks. So in that sense, it feels like it could potentially be a win. I think my best piece of advice, it might sound kind of silly at first, is find some project that either you can do by yourself, like from beginning to end, or you can do with a couple friends beginning to end. Just the act of making something makes you learn how to think about problems in interesting ways. It makes you learn how to come up with interesting solutions. Personally, I started my career outside of the game industry, and I worked in IT and technology consulting, and I made the transition to games because really a lot of work that you do as a game designer or UI designer or things like that, it really comes down to just problem solving, right? Puzzles and problem solving. And if you're good at those things, and if you can practice those things and show that you're good at them, I think you'll be a good candidate for game designer.
Y bueno, gente, pues resumiendo, pues lo que habéis podido ver, un tiempo de desarrollo que a mí personalmente me ha llamado mucho la atención, más largo de lo que me esperaba, esos 18 meses para sacar adelante las nuevas rankings, mucha prueba, mucha cositas, el por qué, pues puede ser un poquito truculento el haberle llamado de otras formas que no fuese hierro, y al final, pues sí que otras cosas podrían haber quedado mejor, pero es la solución que al fin y al cabo es de consenso. Eso pasa muchas veces en cosas internacionales, que como se fijan en cómo se percibe una cosa en un país, en otro, a lo mejor pues en un país sonaba mejor de una forma, pero la que en conjunto suena mejor pues es otra, y en este caso es ese hierro. También me ha gustado mucho el detalle de que quieran plantear cositas nuevas y actualizando el sistema y buscando meterle nuevas vainas y a ver cómo se va desarrollando esta primera temporada de las nuevas arranques. Ya sabéis que el primer split, la prueba va a ser en los servidores de NEA y Corea, y por mi parte, pues poco más. Muchas gracias por estar al otro lado de la pantalla y nos vemos en el siguiente. ¡Adiós! Si no quieres perderte nada, ya sabes, dale a la campana.
We were traveling the mountains just to find out